What would you say are the top strategies and fitness tips that you might recommend for civilians to stay prepared during emergency situations?
Right. So there can be many different types of scenarios you can put yourself in, right? I think that sprinting is a phenomenal tool to have, being able to create distance, right? Because when you create distance, it gives you time, usually, right? And then in that time, you can now critically think of where to go, what to do, so on and so forth, right? And if you have access to tools and you're in the type of, let's say like an active shooter type situation, and you can't run and you can't hide, and now you have to fight. So being able to actually fight is huge. Most people don't know how to fight, whether that's with or without a weapon. It's just, I see red, or I think I'm gonna get some superhuman strength, the adrenaline dump. That doesn't happen.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's just you see people crumble under stress. Right? So this is why having a good, solid foundation of fitness, I would say, is the first thing, right? And then after that, I would say learn principles and concepts of certain situations, like an active shooter, what you could potentially encounter. I would even say some medical training is huge, like some pre-hospital intervention stuff. So application of tourniquets, chest seals. And these are courses that are free. Stop the Bleed has
Chest seals?
Chest seals. So if you get shot, let's just say in the box, what we call, so from the belly button to like the bottom of the clavicle, right? So obviously it's just like kind of like an open cavity. So you can't put a tourniquet on.
That's like the vital zone too. I mean,
Correct. And so you don't want air to go in, right? Because then you tension pneumothorax occurs and you could die that way. So if you put like a chest seal, which is just kind of like it's like a piece of like sticky plastic, is probably the best way to do it. Some type of like plastic adhesive. And you could put it over the wound, and it just obviously prevents the air from getting in, and then you can obviously go to a hospital and actually get treatment. So, but these courses, tourniquet applications, which are super easy to learn, the equipment's super cost effective. It's like you can get one from North American Rescue for like $27. I'm not affiliated with them. I don't get paid by them to say that. But they make COTC, which is the Committee on Tactical Combat Casualty Care, is the committee that kind of decides what tourniquets are deemed acceptable based off of the data and the research that they have from these tourniquets, right? So obviously the goal is to occlude blood flow. And so learning how to apply these interventions increases like your ability to live in those type of situations. Because you think about it, you get some type of arterial bleed minutes, right? So I have some in my book bag downstairs. It's just something I keep. You can carry them in the airport, worldwide, international. I would say so. Fitness, tac med, and then kind of knowing when to navigate in like certain situations is kind of with the whole tac med thing. When should I run? When should I apply aid? And that's all taught in some of those courses. And I would say the third thing is the ability to fight. With your hands. Also with tools, it could be a knife, it could be a gun, it could be whatever, right? And learning how to not only just say, oh, I'm going to carry a gun, so I don't have to do the first two. That's not how it works, right? It all builds together. So I would say that, and then obviously being very safe with it, training with it is huge. Just because you buy a gun doesn't mean you're going to be in shape, right? My attorney actually says, he goes, people buy guns because lifting weights is hard. So they just buy more guns. So like, oh, I'm just going to be more safe if I buy more guns. But it's like, no, you should also learn how to sprint and create space and pick up, basically lift weights, right?
Yeah.
So I would say those three things are really, really important.
Wow. Using a gun, a firearm, would be a last resort, even for a law enforcement officer, would it not be?
Yeah. So this is kind of where the education piece comes in, where situations can go from, let's say, like a hands-on situation to a gun situation in a matter of seconds, right? And then it can go from a gun situation to a hands-on situation in a matter of seconds. So then you de-escalate the level of force, right? So you're in a super high level of force and it goes down to just verbal de-escalation. What we say about tools is that you should be hands-on and verbal, like those should be your skills, and the things on your belt should support those skills and not the other way around. Your tools should not be your go-to, right? You should be, now granted the situation dictates, but you should be competent yourself, So when you go hands-on, you have a plan. You have routes to take of how to get them to the ground, how to control, how to extract arms. If they go to present a weapon, do I disengage? Do I stay in? And so it's those type of scenarios where we need cops to be training in. And that's one reason why I started one of my companies, was because of the lack of that available information and training resource.
How does one verbally de-escalate a situation?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. So what year were you born?
82.
82. Okay, I'm 88. We didn't really have cell phones, right? We couldn't like emoji a conversation. Okay, you look at cops now. When I was training newer cops, born in the 90s, right? You'd say even like mid 90s, right? They have a hard time communicating. It's all about leveling with people, not talking at them, talking to them, reasoning with people. I would say that the increase in technology has probably decreased one's ability to communicate well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you find younger cops are less effective verbal communicators?
Correct. Very, very, very difficult for them to, and it's interesting because you're not just having a conversation, you're still trying to be socially aware of the environment, of their hands, of other people in the vehicle or the room, whatever the case may be. And a lot of them just have a hard time like having a conversation and leveling with people. And so you can teach it. It just takes, obviously, when you're raised in that environment, it's just more difficult. But again, I could hand them a cell phone. They can GIF or meme their way through a conversation, no problem, right?
Yeah.
Right? But it's like, no, we're having a conversation. This person's upset. Do you know how to calm somebody? And sometimes you can't, but do you know how to calm this person down? No? Okay, well, this is where you need to train. This is where you're lacking. So one big thing that cops lack is the ability to self-assess their level of training.
Interesting. And where does becoming a better self-assessor, where does that come from?
Yeah, so it comes from knowledge and experience and exposure, really, but it's difficult when you're new and you don't have that experience and you don't have access to that knowledge, but you have access to social media, right? You have access to other resources. So it's the want to be better. You have to want it, right? I'll give you an example. I got into a use of force. Guy had a child support warrant, 2:00 in the morning, by myself, went hands-on. He went to pull away.
What do you mean hands-on?
So I went to go put him under arrest.
Wow.
And I was young, and I grabbed him. He started to pull away, and my mind went blank. I had no options. I had no routes to take, right? And so that's when I realized you're lacking in your hands-on skills. Experience showed me where I lacked, right? And it's terrifying because luckily I have very good verbal skills. I was able to talk him into handcuffs is what we call it, right? I was able to talk him into handcuffs, luckily, right? And then, and how I did that was I told him, hey man, sometimes dispatch makes a mistake. I'm doing it for your safety and mine, but I already knew he was wanted. It was confirmed. And so I was able to do it that way. But then I went and started training jiu-jitsu immediately the next day.
Wow.
The next day I was like, I was strong. I mean, I was doing CrossFit twice a day at the time. I was lifting weights. I could run a 6-minute mile, no problem. But I went to go grab a dude and my mind went blank. And that feeling of your heart just kind of like dropping and you feel empty inside, that happened. Hair on the back of my neck stood up and I was like, there were some choice words. And then I was like, man, I'm out. You know? So, yeah. And that's how I learned.
How did you pick jiu-jitsu?
Why?
Yeah. Like why of all the different martial arts?
So jiu-jitsu is the art of basically controlling someone on the ground, right? Most violent encounters go to the ground, right? It's a lot harder to control somebody who's violent standing. Obviously, the ground is a phenomenal resource because it doesn't move, right? And so, and it was just a way, it was more of like the principles and concepts. And this is kind of where it kind of goes into one of my companies, which is called Effective Fitness Combatives. And we use the principles and concepts of wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and some striking because you can't use a lot of what jiu-jitsu is because it's a sport, right? But there are aspects of it that directly translate into like the self-defense combatives world, right? And I say combatives because self-defense is a defense of oneself, and that's not what cops necessarily do because I'm going after you to place you under arrest. That's not self-defense. That's subject control, right? So we kind of just umbrella it under combatives. So, I started training, and my first day in jiu-jitsu was really interesting. So there's a kid. He's a man now. His name's Sebastian. He was about 16 or 17 years old. His mom dropped him off at jiu-jitsu. He's probably 150 pounds soaking wet. Here I am, 190 pounds, professional police officer, right? And we go to bump hands, and this kid mauls me. Mauls me. His mom's playing, like friggin' Angry Birds in the corner, and this kid's just choking me out nonstop. And I'm like, if this kid who's in high school can literally kill me at any point in time, I need to reevaluate where I'm spending my time training. So I cut back on my strength training. I'm strong enough, right? Cool. Now let me start to invest here. I started going once a week, and then my buddies were, of course, like, no, dude, you're not going to get better. You go twice a week. That's the magic number. So, I started going twice a week, and I haven't stopped. So it's been almost 7 years.
7 years. Wow.
Yeah. So I'm a purple belt for all the jiu-jitsu listeners out there, and which is like right in the middle of white, blue, purple, brown, black. And so, yeah, I absolutely love it. And so kind of what it came from is the jiu-jitsu side of it is really interesting because people think, oh, well, you need judo, you need to do the stand-up stuff. Well, if you integrate it properly into the profession, it's perfect. It's perfect for what law enforcement does. Now, where there was no solution is the integration of the weapons into the environment of policing. So obviously there are rules that one has to follow when using force, right? There's law, there's case law, there's policy and things like that, which is it sometimes makes it more difficult for the situation, but they're rules for a reason, So that's what we did. I reached out to a buddy of mine, Jay Wadsworth. He's the director of the company. He's also a co-founder, and he's been doing this for 22 years. So my experience, I recognize my weakness was I have very limited experience in law enforcement, only 7 years. My jiu-jitsu credentials are meh, right? Jay's a black belt, professional MMA fighter, been a SWAT guy, special weapons and tactics for 14 years of his 22, worked street crimes, all these like high-speed units, right? I got with him. I said, Jay, I'm really good at the business side of this and packaging up material and making it digestible for law enforcement. I said, I want to do a combatives company with you. And he was like, hell yeah. And so fast forward 2 years, and we just did the NYPD last month. We did Chicago 2 weeks ago, Chicago PD. So the two largest agencies in the country. I'm actually out here tomorrow meeting with LASD. So yeah, it's been crazy. Upwards of 350 agencies so far across the country.
That's amazing.
So, yeah.
So what does the company do? It basically trains law enforcement officers to be fitter?
Yeah. So I have, it is kind of confusing. So I have the effective fitness training, which is the fitness side. And then I have effective fitness combatives, which is the combative side. So, they're two separate entities on paper. Now on the combative side, so we do like a train the trainer course. We have a 4-day, 40-hour course or 5-day, 40-hour course where we do some vehicle extractions on day 5. And so we go to the agency. They usually send their trainers, and we teach them basically the foundation, stance, grip, all the way to weapons-based entanglements, team tactics, so on and so forth. And then we can even do like specialized stuff like long gun retention and canine integration. So really, it's endless. And so we go there, we teach, they take it back to their agency. They implement our curriculum, and then it trickles down to the guys on patrol, right? And then we're also able now through technology is to obviously try to defeat the problem, what we just talked about, which was the lack of continuous education, right? So we developed an online program. We have an app, so they can actually go in and they can look at the curriculum before going to training. So we're building that foundation, and it's a stepping stone to get them to becoming really effective on the street. So it's not just, Max, you're coming in, you're gonna hit the bag and you're gonna go. It's, okay, now we're working team tactics. We're gonna work low anchors, which is like controlling the legs, and then we're gonna work, arm extractions, which is getting the hands behind the back, right? So now when they come in, they've already watched the videos, they've already listened to the instructions, so they have an idea. Now they're getting more repetitions in. They're getting more consistent training. Then the next one is, oh, look, now we're doing this. And we have data now that shows that this works. It's saving lives. saving workers' comp claims, so nobody's really getting injured as much, right? So it works. There's no argument that it does not work.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win. I mean, you have one bad use of force, right? Let's not even say it's a shooting. Let's say it's just like an bad use of force. I mean, you're going to pay out $250K, and then to integrate it, like a really good curriculum is less than that. It's not even half.
Wow.
So if you can bypass one incident, you're already saving money, which is, let's be real, that's what the civilian review boards and the upper echelon, that's all they care about.
Yeah.
They say law enforcement's a family and all this jazz. In some places it is. But I would say in the majority of places, they say that as a punchline, right? People talk about the brotherhood and all that stuff. It's a job, it's a profession, it's a very honorable one if you do it right and well. But I mean, there's a lot of issues in leadership, and that's why it's so slow to turn. You're like, well, Adam, if you have the data and you have the product, why isn't everybody just jumping on this? It's because it wasn't their idea. They're slow to change. Change takes forever in law enforcement. Attorneys, city councils, civilian review boards, which is the worst thing ever. You have a bunch of people sitting on a panel who have no experience in anything, telling them what cops should do.
Yeah, and it just sounds like, I mean, when the shit hits the fan, that there is still, like, regardless of all the training, there's still like a huge amount of uncertainty, and things can, especially, things can go sideways real quick.
Super fast.
And you want to be as prepared as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of our goal, right? And we talk about fitness. I mean, you talk about health and wellness and fitness all the time. I mean, if you look at the data on law enforcement, it's terrible. Just think about just shift work in general.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. The increase in cancer, right? Like, there's just so bad for your sleep, so bad for everything, right? But it's a very necessary job, right? My wife, she was a night shift nurse for almost a decade, right? And obviously, when she was younger, it really wasn't that bad. But as she got older, I could see it just wearing on her and wearing. And I was like, babe, you gotta stop, And then she ended up, well, I have 4 kids, and now she stays at home. But and now she really gets no sleep.
It's crazy that our toughest and yet most important professions, like frontline workers, right? Sure. Cops, who are literal superheroes in the modern world.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, it's just so it can be at times such a difficult job to navigate. I mean, trying to eat healthy while you're on the road, the disruption to your circadian rhythms. I mean,
it's crazy, and two, it's also education, right? They're not going to seek out your podcast or Andrew Huberman's podcast, right? They're not going to seek those podcasts out because, one, who wants to learn about sleep, right? Who wants to learn about how to reduce inflammation in the body? Who wants to learn how much protein one should consume, what supplements they should be taking, right? So that's the reason why I started the fitness company first. It actually started because I wrote a proposal for my agency about how to make cops fitter, giving them a resource to utilize. It wasn't going to cost any money. I presented it, and it basically was just not a priority to them. It's fine. I basically wrote a business model, and I took that to my buddy who's a physical therapist, Eve, and I said, hey, man, I have an idea. And he's like, dude, this is a great idea. I don't think there's anything out there like it. And that's kind of how it started. And since that time, we've had over 20,000 members, cops, on the app. We raised a bunch of money for anti-human trafficking. And we give away a lot of information, like free information on, 22 tips for night shift, right? How to sleep as a cop, how to sleep, like the best ways to sleep when you're working night shift, meal prep ideas, free workout programs, like anything. We just basically just give it away because we're like, hey, we want you guys to be fit, right? It's super important because it's the foundation of survival, right? Fitness is the foundation for survival. And from a law enforcement perspective, your foundation is going to, your level of fitness is going to really dictate the level and effectiveness of all other levels of force, right? So cops have levels of forces, right? The first one is officer presence. You simply just being there. So if you come out of the car looking like a soup sandwich, what are people going to assume? Like, oh, I'm going to walk over this guy. But you get out with a nice fitted uniform, not like, chips back in the day, but like, I mean, you get out in a nice fitted uniform.
You look fit, yeah.
You look fit, you know what I mean? Like you have that command presence, you have good posture. People notice that. They're like, oh, okay. We're listening. Instead of just yelling and all this stuff, doesn't go anywhere. Just showing up and looking professional is huge, right? And then having the ability to say, I know my hands-on skills are good, right? I know my abilities well enough to where I don't have to start yelling. I can level with this person. Take off that badge and you're nothing. You're right. Maybe I am nothing, but we don't want to go there, right? Instead of being like, oh yeah, and then that's where you start to match, and the matching doesn't do anything. You want to bring him back down, because the last thing you want to do is get into a use of force. That shit hurts.
Well, just like verbally abusing a cop like that, that's also grounds for arrest, is it not?
No.
Oh, it's not?
No.
I thought
It's your First Amendment right.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's the whole like freedom of speech. Now, I mean, yeah, you can't like be. So there's every state's different in their settings, but like there's a charge called public disorderly. So you can't obviously be disorderly in public. So causing a scene, a really big scene, you could be arrested, obviously. But I mean, I've had people flick me off, shout profanities at me, and I'm just.
Wow.
Because, you can't take it personal. It's a job. And that's the thing is, they could be like, they can make fun of my shirt, make fun of my hair, whatever. And you're just like, cool.
But aren't there laws like preventing people from verbally abusing? I mean, like I grew up in New York City, and if I recall correctly, there was like, you're not allowed to like talk negatively to like bus drivers or like mailmen or something like I feel like.
I mean, you can't assault them. Like you can't physically touch them.
Yeah.
But I mean, you could. Now, there are ways to say maybe that person is trespassing, whatever the case may be. But I mean, just because someone shouts profanities at you isn't really grounds for arrest. Wow. And there's this thing is there's multiple YouTube channels with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, if not millions, of just they're called First Amendment auditors, and their only job is to get an emotional response from a cop to then sue and make money.
Whoa!
It's literally their first. You can just YouTube First Amendment auditors, and it'll come down. And what they do is
that's awful.
Yeah, and they do it in certain ways. Like some will do like an open carry thing where where they'll be carrying a rifle out in public, and it's like, oh, it's my Second Amendment right, but the cops are going to get called. Man walking around the freeway with a gun or whatever, right? And sometimes they are within the confines of the law. Sometimes they're not, right? But again, their goal is to get an emotional response from law enforcement to then sue and make money.
Wow.
That is their means of income.
Oh, man, it's so sad.
It is sad. Imagine being that person.
Yeah, no, seriously. What a loser.
Yeah.
Damn. How much training do you think is required? Like, I guess let's just take jiu-jitsu. Like how long, like assuming not everybody's going to become a purple belt, like how much do you think you need to train in order to have some degree of proficiency when it comes to defending yourself? Great question. In a situation.
So yes, I always tell people, please train jiu-jitsu anyways. It's a great, it's a great exercise. Doesn't matter your age or any of that stuff. Now, this kind of gets interesting. There's a difference between training jiu-jitsu and training combatives, right? So, because yes, there are principles and concepts of jiu-jitsu that then definitely translate over into combatives. But yeah, our courses aren't just designed for people who train jiu-jitsu, because most cops don't train jiu-jitsu. So we can take, now you have to be a competent, in shape person. You take that person and you put them through our 40-hour course. Being an athlete always helps, right? Being able to move your body well and being body aware is huge. That's what's important. Is you're taking principles and concepts into a curriculum, picking out the key points that you're trying to hit on, and then having them rep that out. Now, they're not complicated because it's all just basically posture, structure, base, angles. And we try to make it to where it all flows together. So whenever we start, like for some of the listeners, if you're in a mounted position, like you see it on UFC, guys will get in mount. So one person's on top of their abdomen and they're able to kind of strike, right? It's not a great position to be if you're on bottom. Now in UFC, that's great because there's no weapons involved. There's no other people. They're in an octagon with a referee. Now on the street, you get into a mounted position, that person can then grab you, right? And now you can't create space. We talked about how important space was. Let's say, someone's on top of me they're on top of somebody and they grab around my waist, and an angry wife or whoever wants to come and stab the cop. Well, then I can't disengage. I can't create space because I'm grounded. So we use more of a knee on top approach to where they can keep mobility. So their knee is across, kind of like the bottom of a seatbelt. So if you kind of picture like my shin bone on kind of like the pelvis of somebody, and I'm just basically putting hip pressure down so they can't move their hips, right? And then I'm going to try to start to control their limbs and put their limbs to one side of their body. So they're kind of like over here. So they can't really strike me. They can't really reach for anything. And that's what we teach. It's a very simple concept. Get all the limbs to one side of the body. Most people can say, I understand what that means. Okay. So then you start to build on that. Then you start to add weapons and then handcuffing. But it's also about timing. It's also about, let's get them really tired before we start to like actually extract arms. So that's kind of where a lot of people think when they see all these videos of cops just like wailing on people, and it's like a dog pile, like the infamous dog pile, where you just see cops like everybody's pulling. They're all working against each other. They're not solving any problems. And what's more frustrating is when one guy's trained and three aren't. Because then you see the one guy about to do something really good and actually control the situation, then the other guy comes in and knocks it off because he doesn't know what he's doing. Wow. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
So, but it doesn't take much, you're saying. Like I've never trained jiu-jitsu. I've my middle brother Andrew, actually, he's a purple belt as well. He's
nice.
Super strong jack dude, tough as hell. I took up boxing during the pandemic, which is like a standing.
Yeah, it's legit. Yeah.
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 But yeah, for your average person, I mean, I think like self-defense is one of these areas where, there are so many aspects to modern life that we've just collectively as a culture decided to outsource. We outsource self-defense to cops. We outsource our culinary literacy to DoorDash.
Right.
We outsource health literacy to our doctors, who are limited when it comes to actually instituting wellness, right?
Right, correct. And that's super important. And most people don't know where to start. And that's usually the big thing is like, I don't know, like, for example, like why'd you take up boxing?
Because I felt that I live in Los Angeles, and I took it up mid 2020 when things around me started to escalate to a crazy degree, I mean, that was a very chaotic year for many reasons. And I just felt vulnerable. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that feeling.
And boxing is great. We talk about jiu-jitsu and wrestling and judo, but striking's a great way to create space. People don't like. Now, is it what we want to do? No, because the last thing I want to do is have a stand-up boxing match with the suspect and go blow for blow, right? Because sometimes there is a boxer's luck and he's shown the chin and you're out, right? And that's not fun, right? So being able to create space or close space is also really important, especially when there's weapons involved. That's what a lot of people, when they think about carrying something like a gun, if you're not training weapon retention, how to keep your weapon on your persons, you're just a holster for someone else. Because it's really easy to take a gun from somebody.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's all about leverage, right? So the barrel of the gun is usually longer than the handle. If I control the barrel of the gun, I can take the gun from you.
Yeah, well, I don't carry, but
right. But I'm sure some of your listeners do.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's just important to train with the gun. Obviously be proficient, be accurate, be fast, but also learn that just because you carry it doesn't mean you're safe. You could just be a holster for somebody else who's going to take your gun and use it against you or other people.
Oh, it's terrifying.
It is terrifying, and it happens.
Wow.
It truly happens. And so, there is the FBI UCR, the Uniform Crime Report, is the biggest data collection of law enforcement use of force and law enforcement related instances in the country. And they even go through, the line of duty deaths and how they were caused and why they were caused and things like that. And they even there's a section of officers even being killed with their own guns.
Wow.
Not from a self-harm perspective. I want to be clear,
people taking their guns.
Correct.
Wow. Man, you've got to have some serious cojones to...
Yeah, but that's the thing is some people don't. And there's like, this job is not for everybody.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, I put 7 years in and then I left the profession. Honestly, it was the hardest thing I had to do because I had this conversation with a buddy of mine recently, because this job, it's really easy for it to become your identity. It's not a job, it's who you are.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then when you leave, this is when I talk about the brotherhood. When you leave, it's almost like, bye. The door closing and you're just looking at an empty, just a freaking blank door, you know? It's a very interesting feeling. I was sad. I mean, I'm very open about it. I freaking cried when I left, when I put a resignation. It was the best job I ever had, but it was toxic in certain ways, more from the leadership side of things. And then I got out right before things started kind of going south in 2020. It was just something that I had to do. I saw an opportunity to grow one of my businesses, which was the fitness business. And I just wanted to dedicate more time because you can always go back. Like, the job's not going anywhere. You know what I mean? So if I ever wanted to go back, I could. But this was my mission. Like, my mission changed. Like, I didn't hate the profession. I love it. I wanted to change it on a much bigger scale.
Yeah, and you are.
And that's why I do what I do.
I love it. As a law enforcement professional, do you think more people should have firearm proficiency and own a gun?
100%. I think, I think that there's so much good information out there. There's also so much bad information out there, as you know, in the world of social media. But yes, firearm training, just in general, right? The best thing one can do is if you want to be taken seriously and you want to be really, really good, is to do competitive shooting. There are some organizations, USPSA, IDPA. I'm not affiliated with any of those agencies or companies or organizations, I guess I should call them. But yeah, it's all about time, speed, and accuracy. That's it. How fast can you shoot the targets? How clean can you shoot them? But you also learn gun safety. You also learn, how to shoot accurately, kind of under stress, under a timer, right? Yes, the cardboard is not shooting back at you. That's kind of an argument, but you're becoming more proficient. You're developing those skills. It's just like if you've been working out, people are like, oh, you're on steroids. Well, maybe the dude's been working out for 30 years. He's been eating well for 30 years. Yeah. Maybe he's been taking creatine for 30 years, right? Like, maybe he's been doing all the right things for 30 years. So it's one of those things where it's like you have to put in the time and effort, but as it pertains to carrying a firearm, like, that's honestly the biggest thing, is just train with it. Train with it at a high level. You can dry fire, which is you're going to remove the source of ammunition, make sure the gun is completely clean. You're going to look in there and you're going to make sure that there's no bullets, and then you're going to put the ammo away. And you can even, like, sometimes when I'm at home, I'll shoot the light sockets because they're kind of like smaller targets, and I'll just kind of dry fire. So just kind of like put the sights on there, squeeze the trigger, gun goes click, not boom, because there's no ammo in it. And I just kind of work the sights and just work transitions and get my eyes at the target if I can't go to the range.
Wow.
And it's free, right? Because you have a gun, it's just safe.
Yeah.
And so it just allows one to get those reps in. It's super important. And I used to, like, even before shift, I used to do a preventative maintenance on my gun. I used to load my gun every shift just to make sure I had a bullet in the chamber, because there's been situations where cops go to draw their gun and they go to shoot and it goes click and not boom. And that's a very situation where you don't want that to happen. Right? No. Because seconds matter. And then again, if you don't train, you're not going to know to tap and rack the gun or load another round in the gun. And so it's just, there's so much that goes into law enforcement. And because society demands cops to be experts in everything when they show up, right? Like, when you call 911, you solve the problem, right? That could be a distressed child. It could be a wife, a husband, a whatever, right? It could be a medical situation. It could be an active shooter. You got to be proficient in all of those areas.
Yeah.
No pressure, right?
No pressure.
Yeah.
Do you think cops want to see more people, more licensed gun owners?
Dude.
That's fascinating.
I encourage people to carry 100%, because think about it. Law enforcement's a reactive profession. They're called. You call 911, cops show up. It's very rare that cops will see a crime in progress, right? Usually it doesn't happen. I mean, it does. I say it does happen, but it's a reactive profession in general, like, even from a training aspect. But Yeah, like I 100% encourage people to carry. Just be responsible, get training, don't be dumb. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, hey, if a cop pulls you over, like this is what I do when I get pulled over, which I do get pulled over sometimes. Is because, excuse me, I know what it's like to be on the other side of the door. It's you don't know what you're expecting. You don't know if this person had a bad day, this person just murdered somebody, whatever the case may be. So I roll down all my windows, okay? Hands on the steering wheel, 10 and 2. If it's at night, I turn all the interior lights on, right? I want to make him feel as comfortable as possible because I also know how some cops train. and the last thing I want is to give them any indication that I'm a threat, right? So I tell them, and even before they walk up, I get my license out. I kind of have it all in a little package in my console. My license, my registration, proof of insurance is on my phone, right? So I have everything ready. So when they walk up, my hands are visible. I have everything on the dashboard. My hands never go below my steering wheel. I'm not digging through stuff, right? I grab it and I hand it to them, and then I just put my hands back here. That's it. Everything is yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, sir, no, ma'am, right? And just that's it. There's no need for any more conversation. There's no need for, well, I wasn't figure it out in court. That's it, right? Like don't have the conversation. It's not worth your time. You're gonna get just more mad for no reason, right? Just take the ticket, take the warning, and if you think you were written the ticket unjustly, then take it to court. That's why you have a court date. You are innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah. So be as polite as possible.
That's it. It's a really simple concept because most cops, man, like they're normal people, right? Like I actually had a conversation yesterday with somebody about this. Cops are members of society. Like there's not a cop farm where they're raised from birth, right? Like they're normal. Now for the troopers out there, there might be a trooper farm somewhere, but they're just normal people of society. They have moms, they have dads, they have kids, right? So like they have feelings, most of them do, right? At least I did. And so, being able to level or reasons like, hey, is there a reason why you're speeding? Just tell them, hey man, I got to take a poop, like real bad. You know what I mean? He's probably been there, right?
Yeah.
It's like, all right, man, well, please don't poop yourself now. You know what I mean? I'm not saying use that as an excuse to speed, okay? But I'm saying that, they're people. Like, so just be respectful, and again, yes, if the cop's being an asshole, he's being an asshole, right?
Yeah.
He's having a bad day, obviously the mental health side of things, you do this job long enough. I've seen guys do the job for 20 years and they're just salty. They're just salty dudes. Because again, if you think about it, people don't call cops to say, hey, you want to come to a barbecue? They don't call them 911 to come hang out. They call 911 because there's a problem.
Yeah.
They want cops to solve that problem.
It's amazing to me. I mean, these cops go into sometimes the most dangerous situation. I mean, they go in sight unseen to something that could be, like a non-issue essentially, but they could also be being called into an incredibly dangerous situation.
Yeah.
And they go nonetheless.
Yeah,
it's
or
amazing.
or a really graphic situation where you're seeing like the job is not normal.
Like what? What are some of the crazier things you've seen?
So my last call that I went on was a 11-year-old girl who drowned.
Oh my God.
It's my last call.
Wow.
Right. So that's like, and then at the time I didn't have kids. I have kids now. I see it. I see everything. Right. And so it's like, that was the last call that I ever took as a cop.
How do you I mean, I guess you can never unsee something like that.
And then, I'll be honest with you. I actually went and talked to somebody after I had my first kid because I was having like, I don't know, I'm not a psychologist or whatever, but like I was having like day flashes where like my son was in the water and I was trying to swim after him and I was trying to reach and I could, like every time I would miss him I could like barely grab him and I was like, whoa, like I would snap at him and be like, that's not normal.
Wow.
Right. So I mean, like my buddy Travis Howes says it best. He was a cop and a firefighter and they also see some crazy stuff too. And he said this: how do you expect someone to be normal? Say, hey babe, how was your day at work after you had, worked a wreck on the interstate where the whole family died, where your next issue was okay, now you're dealing with a domestic dispute, right? And then it was okay, now it was you help an old lady change a flat tire or whatever, right? Like the range of calls is whatever, and then you expect that person to come home and just be normal. You can. You can't, I mean, for the most part, you can't. Now, some people can internalize it better than others, right? That was the one call it was that last call. I mean, it wasn't my first call that I've ever had to deal with something like that, but it was just, for some reason, it was that one that always stuck with me.
Wow.
And then, I only had issues when I had my first kid. So that was my trigger, was having my first kid and being like, whoa, that was weird. And I remember exactly where I was when it happened. I remember the date. It was like, I told my wife and she was like, that's not normal. And I was like, I know it's not normal.
Wow.
And I didn't, at first I was like, oh man, no, I'm fine, dude. I've seen this before. I'm good. No, it just like hit me like a ton of bricks.
Does the profession offer mental health services?
Yeah. So that's actually a really good topic. So some do, some don't. There is a stigma.
A stigma against seeking mental health services?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because
Wow.
now you're not fit for duty.
Wow. Interesting.
Now that's not everywhere, but there are phenomenal resources out there for cops that aren't associated with your insurance, that are not associated with your agency, that I definitely recommend. I don't have the names off the top of my head, but if you guys want to DM PolicePost, or I'll be more than happy to get you those references. I've had a lot of guys reach out, and I always take that stuff very seriously. Hey man, I was just in a shooting. I'm good. I was shot. I had a guy DM me. I was shot 3 times on a call, and I'm just not doing so good. Do you know? He's like, I try to look on the internet for any help, and I was like, dude, I'm not going to give you internet help. I got him talking to a person. I was like, I got someone that can help you. I was like, this is my buddy Jeff. This is what he does. He's a former cop. Like, this is his job after he got out of law enforcement. I said, he's not affiliated with any agency. Just call him. They chat. He's like, hey man, I really appreciate it. But yeah, it's tough, man. My best friend, he's an active cop now, and he wanted to go talk to somebody. He's been in a lot of critical incidences as a cop, and it kind of started to affect him after about 17 years of law enforcement. You know, there's actually there was a study out. I can't remember who did this actual study, but it talked about critical incidences and like how often they occur to like a normal person that's not a cop. It's 2 to 3 in their lifetime.
What is a critical incident?
So that's also kind of weird in the definition. Something you might find a critical incident. So I think it's something like a shooting or a car accident or some type of like where it's out of the norm.
Yeah, just something
right?
bad.
Correct. 2 to 3 for someone who's not a first responder. It's like 400 for a cop.
Wow.
So that's like almost 1 a day for a year.
That'll take a toll.
100%, dude. Especially you're working 12-hour shifts on a shitty diet. Right? Like poor sleep, poor leadership. Like, now again, that's not everywhere. I'm not saying that's all law enforcement. There are some really good agencies out there that take care of their people, that do provide fitness and health and wellness apps and people to come in and do yoga. Like there's some really good agencies out there that do really good things for their officers. And I recommend people go seeking them out. Florida's great. Texas is great. There are actually some really good agencies in California. Most people know, the LAPD and things like that. But there are some really good agencies in the Bay Area. And because I have some guys that work for me and they work out of the Bay Area and they love it. Like they have the best leadership. He's like, dude, my chief was at my birthday party. Like, it's just like people actually care. Right. But if you are looking to get into law enforcement, I suggest talking to people before just applying to.
I can't even imagine. I mean, I know LA the best because I live here, but
Sure.
I can't even imagine the toll that it must take from a mental health standpoint to be, for example, like, to be stationed down on like Skid Row and the shit that like you must see down there. I
can't even imagine, dude.
The mental illness, the drug use, the prostitution, the like all
everything,
the homelessness. Yeah.
I mean, you really want to know what's tough for cops? It's the child stuff.
Wow.
That whether it's like an accidental or an intentional anything with a child, dude, that's like the one thing that like most cops. So my buddy, he posts like a little Q&A on his Instagram page, and he'll post like, what's the worst call you ever went to, or what's whatever, and it's 99% of it's all child related. It's just terrible, dude. They're so innocent, whatever. But again, you go to that, to another call, to going home.
Man.
That's not, again, it's not normal.
Yeah.
Normal people don't see that stuff. Like seeing someone deceased is not normal. right? Like, now granted, like if it's just like an old person or whatever, okay, maybe. But if it's like mutilated or whatever the case may be, it is even just like a freaking car accident. It just smells different. You know what I mean? Like it's it's a very tactile profession. Like you're gonna touch, you're gonna smell, you're gonna hear. It's all of your senses are gonna be involved, and you don't just forget those things. You know what I mean? And so, but to come back to the mental health side. Now I don't have any research to prove this, and you might can kind of provide some insight, but high level training or knowledge and experience in one area, I feel like, especially as it pertains to use of force, right? I think that if you're highly trained and you get into a critical incident, it's not going to be as critical as your brain might think it is because you've been there before in a training environment. It's just an exposure thing. It's just like with jiu-jitsu. You are basically comfortable being uncomfortable, right? You're okay. Some guy's on top. I can't breathe. He's starting to choke me. I'm not going to panic. How do I get out? You start to critically think your way out of these things, right? That's why also jiu-jitsu is good for not just self-defense, but also just for, I'm not in a good spot right now. How do I get into a better position? Okay, good. You recognize you're in a bad spot. Now it's time to improve the position, right? So that's kind of what it is. That's why it's important to train cops at a high level with good curriculum. Now I understand there's some time constraints and some money constraints, but there's still really good curriculums out there that are very cost effective and time efficient. And we have the data to prove it. Like we've and that's really what it comes down to, is being able to prove it, right? You're a data guy, you read a lot of research and all, beyond a reasonable doubt is a good feeling, right? When you see a research and you're like, okay, I know that beyond a reasonable doubt that I'm gonna use your extra virgin olive oil, like that's better for you than canola oil.
Yeah.
Duh. Yeah. Because it's just very obvious, right?
Stands to reason, logically makes sense, and there's good data to back that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it's the same thing as, okay, well, I'm gonna use the data because it shows a direction of positive, influence on my body. So I'm gonna use extra virgin olive oil, right? So if we have the data to show, city councils and chiefs and that, hey, this works and this is why, and you still be surprised. No, we're not doing that. And then for someone who's logical goes, well, canola oil is terrible for you, but you're still going to do it anyways? Why? It just kind of makes you go, why? So, and you can't really answer that because it's a personal thing.
Yeah.
Right. So now it's not an objective view anymore. It's a subjective view. So now it's not about creating positive change. It's about you. And that's where the poor leadership comes in.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like as a child of the internet, like you grow up so desensitized to so many things,
That's true.
But it probably doesn't help that much when you're seeing something in the flesh, like seeing one of these
smells are different too.
Critical. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. No, it's again, it's a very interesting profession. And again, like the training leading up to it, they don't tell you anything. Like when I left the police academy, I felt like I didn't know anything. I didn't feel prepared. At zero. I was like, okay, I know a little bit, but I didn't feel like I was ready, really depending on where you work. Like if you work somewhere like LAPD or somewhere like Oakland, right? Like you're obviously going to get a lot of experience really quick. You work Chicago, a lot of experience really quick. You work a high call volume areas, as we call it, you're going to get a lot of experience really quick. But if you're a cop that works in like a suburb and it's like no crime and everybody's nice, Pleasantville, like you're probably not going to have that much experience. So it might take you 10 years to feel like you know what you're doing. Whereas if you work in LA, you're going to get 10 years of experience in a year, right? So that's also something to take, kind of into consideration. Because I have 2-3 guys that work in the California area. One works in Oakland, works in the Oakland area, and the stories. He's like, yeah, dude, it's nonstop.
Wow.
I can't even imagine what it's like working in Oakland. I have no.
Yeah, well, I was just up in San Francisco, and I was staying in, I think it's called the Tenderloin District or something, or it was like,
sounds good.
Open, just the most obvious open air drug use, like I've ever seen, like and I was like staying in this like really nice hotel, which the juxtaposition was just like so odd because you step right outside, and particularly at night, I mean, there's like people on the street like doing all kinds of shit, and I left the hotel to get like a snack. This is before I really was aware of like what was going on, which I think is also maybe something you could speak to, like how to just generally gain awareness about like and assess the level of danger in a given situation, you know?
Yeah.
But like it took me like I had left my hotel, and no sooner than 3 minutes of just walking out on my own did I see like a very obvious human excrement like on the street. You know, needles and syringes and things like that. And it was just, it's just crazy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So the biggest advice I can give for being more aware is don't be on this.
Don't be on your phone.
45-degree syndrome. Everybody's so in tune with likes and shares and check out my new Snapchat or whatever. I don't know. I'm not on TikTok or any of that jazz, so I don't really know what these young kids are doing these days. But yeah, like that's honestly the biggest thing. Just being open, like having your, you know, if you're going to have your headphones in, maybe have them like ambient mode so you're not just secluded off from the world. You know what I mean? Also avoid times where you know crime might be happening. Like if you, hey, like as my parents used to say, nothing good happens after midnight, right? So they say, you don't need to be out past 12 o'clock, and they're not wrong. I mean, for the most part, they're not wrong. You should really be sleeping. Right?
Yeah.
So, right?
From a health standpoint.
From a health standpoint, you should be sleeping, right? So, you know, that's it. It's one of those things. Just literally staying vigilant will save lives.
If you see somebody who looks kind of kooky, you know, as you're walking on on the sidewalk, is it advisable to like cross to the other side or like?
Yeah. Or the thing is like the whole spider sense thing where like the hair on the back of your neck stands up. Use that. Yeah. Please. Even if you're wrong, great. Who cares? Use it. You feel like something is not right, leave. Create distance, create space.
Any special tips for women?
Yeah.
Because women are more vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know, they're not.
Yeah, sure. So
they're more often a target.
Sure. Stay off your phones.
Yeah.
Stay off your phones. You know, I'm not a fashion guy, but obviously like be mindful of what you're wearing, you know, obviously, especially late at night during like the bar districts and things like that. That's where a lot of assaults can happen, you know. I would say obviously be fit, right? Be fit. Understand your abilities. Understand that men are biologically stronger than women. So if you're being confronted by a man and he's getting physical with you, you need to create space.
You can also kick him in the balls.
Correct. I mean, create space, right? Yeah. So like also train jiu-jitsu. Because we have, so at EFC, we have 4 female instructors, 2 of which are professional MMA fighters.
Wow.
And they're savages. I mean, they are, we have 3 black belts and 1 purple belt, and they're amazing. And they'll be the first to tell you. Now, these women can control 99% of men, right? Like for the most part, that you know, of the world, if you think about it. But they'll be the first one to tell you, I don't want to go hands-on. I'm 130 pounds. That dude's 220. If a guy's 220, I'm 190. I'm still like, I'll wait for backup. Fighting hurts. Going hands-on hurts. Like it's not like it's not magic, right? I mean, you can still get punched in the face. They can still present weapons. You can still get hurt. You know, it's all about being smart. And that's where it's, you know, teaching these cops, especially the younger ones, that there's no rush to this, right? Like you have time. And that's where it's like, oh, I need to get him in handcuffs now. Why? Unless he's causing harm to someone else, right? Or to you. Just talk. Give yourself distance. Wait for backup to arrive. Wait for more resources to arrive. And they start doing that, you'll see a lot of incidents just become really boring, and then the media won't cover it. Like I always tell guys, when you go hands-on, you want it to be so boring, it's not YouTube worthy. You want it to be so just blah, like no striking. I mean, yeah, if you have to strike, get the strike, but like no striking. Basically, just be a piece of cheese. That's the best way to describe it. Just lay on them and just kind of like conform to them, and just be boring. If you're boring, nobody's gonna pull their cell phones out and record it. They're gonna say, okay, I'm not gonna get likes and views, so whatever. Perfect.
Create space. And don't use physical force unless it's absolutely a last resort.
Space is the best thing. Sprinting is the best self-defense.
Running away.
Yeah, dude. They can't grab you. They can't touch you. But sprinting. That's why I tell, like, for me, I usually, if I'm out, I always wear shoes. It's very rare that I wear sandals out. Unless I'm, like, going to jiu-jitsu or something, maybe. I'm out, I'm wearing shoes. If I have to pick up my kids, I have a lot of kids. If I have to pick them all up and sprint with them, I'm not going to be sprinting in sandals, especially if I have to run outside or run over, terrain, I want to be capable. So I always tell people, hey, just even by wearing shoes, that even changes the game, because now you're able to create space faster with a sole on your foot that's actually intact, so you're not going to slip and fall, right? Like the likelihood of you falling is greatly reduced because you're not wearing a sandal, or if you're a woman, a heel, right? I mean, you can't. I've never sprinted in heels, but I'm assuming that you can't sprint very well.
I would imagine, yeah, it's probably pretty difficult.
Yeah, it's not good arch support.
But it's very empowering that somebody as credentialed and as capable as yourself, you're saying like run the opposite direction.
Yeah, dude, for myself, yeah, absolutely, and that's where like a lot of these
don't be a hero.
Yeah. Unless you're a cop, then be a hero. Right?
Yeah.
But like, that's the thing too is but there's countless stories that really don't make the news about good citizens, about good Americans stopping active shooters before law enforcement gets there. There's I mean, people say this, and I'll say it again. The best way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
But there is no other solution than good violence.
Well, it's like if you were in Texas, like Texas is a carry state,
sure,
right? Like you don't want to mess with, like, I feel like you would be less inclined, like a sentient being would be less inclined to mess with a random in a state like Texas,
sure,
where the odds are pretty high that they're carrying,
yeah.
compared to like LA, where
Well, if you look at a lot of the active shooters, whenever they put out like the investigation, you look at why they chose that target. You look at why they chose schools or whatever. Well, if it's a gun-free zone, they know they're less likely to encounter resistance, so they can inflict maximum casualty because that's their goal, right? So again, like by creating a safe space, you're actually creating a soft target. People don't think about it like that. It's a gun-free zone. Yeah, for people who abide by the sign and the law or whatever, but there's also the person that doesn't do that. It's a target-rich environment.
Target-rich environment. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, there's been countless active shooters. I go, yeah, I picked this place because it was a gun-free zone. I know I was less likely to encounter resistance.
Wow. No,
so it's like, I mean, so we're kind of doing it to ourselves. You know what I mean? Like we're kind of saying, like we want to ban guns and all this stuff. Gun laws aren't the problem. More like there's like 300 gun laws. Has the gun violence stopped in LA?
No. Well, it's not guns don't kill people. Crazy fucking people kill people, And it's not even necessarily guns. Like there was I don't know if you saw that story recently in Australia where in a mall somebody brought in a knife. Yeah, and killed 7 people with a knife.
Yeah.
You didn't hear anybody saying that asserting we should ban knives.
Correct. Or vehicles. People will take vehicles. They'll run through a crowd of people. Should we ban vehicles? You know what I mean? Like, should we ban forks for fat people? Like, you know what I mean? Like, no. Right? Because there's just plastic and metal put together. It's just a tool.
Yeah.
It's nothing more than this glass sitting here.
Right.
But it's what you do with it. Right. And so that's where people, people ask me all the time, I encourage people to carry. I encourage people to train, stay fit, eat protein. Right. Like, that's not a big thing.
Speaking my language.
Yeah, big protein guy. My first meal when I got in LA was a fillet. I was like, I need to find the closest steak place. So, no, it's huge. And that, again, it all comes together: the fitness, the combatives, the knowledge, education, and again, a lot of this stuff does transfer over to the general public, right? Like people think, well, I'll just call 911. Yeah, look up the average response time in your area. There's a lot that can happen in just about 7 minutes.
You're right. Wow. I wonder what it is here.
Yeah. It's probably 7 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like if we call now, right, it's, hey, there's an emergency. Someone's trying to break into my house.
A lot can go wrong
and kill me. 7 minutes, that's an eternity.
Yeah.
That's 2 songs.
Bro, it's 2 songs.
Think about it.
Mid 2020, when all the riots were happening in Los Angeles, I was living in a house in Santa Monica. And, I moved into that house just before all hell had broken loose with COVID. And then the riots began just a couple months after that. But the whole front side of my house, like on the ground level, was all glass. And I just was like, I was so scared, because the riots were actually, at a certain point, they reached just a couple blocks from where I was living. And of course, Venice, the homeless population there and everything was just nuts. I decided to become a licensed gun owner, and I'm very proud of that, that decision that I made, and I trained, and yeah, because I just felt like so incredibly vulnerable, were somebody to throw a rock through my window or break in or whatever, like I'd be helpless.
Yeah, I mean, think about 7 minutes.
That's a long time.
It's a long time.
Not to mention, like, if were somebody to break in, like the fight or flight, the adrenaline, that you would experience. Sure. Like, would I even be able to pick up my phone, find my phone, and dial 911?
Right. So that goes to my next point: is having a plan. If you have kids, right? If you have your kids, like, and somebody breaks into your house, what's your plan there? Because sometimes, I mean, obviously, kids don't sleep in the same room as the parent, right? So, what's the plan there? Me and my wife, we sleep downstairs. The kids sleep upstairs. Now I have a dog that is trained, so that's my first level of distraction, right?
Yeah.
His job is just to buy me time to get to my tools, right? Because I'm not trying to go hands on when somebody breaks into my house. No, I'm gonna get to my tools. I'm gonna get to work, right? That's it. I'm gonna protect what's mine, right? And so like people have a hard time understanding. Say, oh, I'm just gonna call 911. But just like you said, the adrenaline dump. Where are my kids? Right? Where's my firearm if I do have one? Is it in a lockbox? Okay, how long is it going to take me to undo the lockbox, get the ammo if I have it, whatever, load it, and then be able to acquire? It doesn't take much to break down a door.
Right.
Right? So it's like, okay, what is the plan? How fast can you deploy this plan? Have you trained this? Have you, like, even going to the mall? Do you have a code word with your family? Do your kids know what to do when this happens? It's the reality of the world we live in. It's never going to happen to me until it does.
Right.
Right. And then you're like, damn, I wish I would have trained. I wish I would have had some knowledge. And then again, you'll hear people, they didn't do this and that. But it's like, yeah, but you're responsible for your own life as well. Like, yes, we trust in law enforcement, and there's guys that are doing a phenomenal job. And there's so much that does not get recognized in this profession. It's insane. Like, you like numbers. There's about 70 million interactions between law enforcement and the general public 16 and older a year. 70 million.
Wow.
About 70 million, right? How many of those do you hear about going bad?
Very few.
So from a statistical standpoint.
Like none.
Like, yeah, let's say 5, right? 5 a year that you can think off the top of your head, right? 5 out of 70 million.
I mean, most years go by, you don't hear of anything really.
Right. Right. So, yeah.
Many more times you hear about the amazing stories of
right.
cops rushing in at the right time, like in Australia, where that lunatic was running loose with a knife.
I'm pretty sure it was actually a female cop that actually shot.
It was, yeah.
It was a female cop. Yeah, I actually got sent the video. So that's also another thing is I get people send me all kinds of stuff on social media. So JT, he runs the police post page with me. I have a team that run police posts now. It used to be just me, but now I have a team of active and former cops that help me run the page. Which is good because it's just a new set of eyes. It's a current set of eyes. They're still in the profession, which is huge. So yeah, it's really interesting to think about how many interactions there are, and then the little we hear about. Like, there's not hundreds and hundreds of cops just going around doing bad stuff, right? That's not. There's no accountability. Have you looked at the IA? Cops getting charged and fired? No. Okay. Well, then you don't actually know. Cops aren't being charged and fired for their crimes, because a lot of them are. Like, they get fired for their wrongdoing. They get charged criminally or civilly for what they did, right? And there's, of course, the media does a phenomenal job of cutting clips and cropping things to make it look like cops are doing all this bad stuff. But there was actually one clip, I think it was in California, where he was searching. No, it wasn't California. Excuse me. It was maybe it was Texas, I think. And the cop he was searching the car, and he found a little baggie. It was just empty. And so he was like, oh, it's empty. So he threw it back in the car. And one of the kids was like, oh, you planting drugs, right? And the cop's like, no, I got it on my body cam. Like, you can see everything that I just did right here. Like, I'm recording. He's like, cool, man, I'm recording too. Like, whatever. Well, they just cropped it of the cop throwing the baggie in the car. Right? So that blew up.
Wow.
It blew up. Oh, cop, this guy, we want his badge. We want him charged. And then of course, people came to me and I posted the entire video.
Yeah.
I said, watch this entire video. Watch the whole 7-minute interaction of the situation. And you'll see that the cop's like, yeah, dude, it's empty. It's just a bag. He didn't plant nothing.
Yeah.
But that one clip blew up social media.
Wow.
Right? So that's also one thing where, like, just because you might have heard of an interaction and it, you know, it was probably justified. Most things that cops do are justified. The data supports that, right? Now, of course, there are things that they do that are unjustified, obviously, but those are usually taken care of through a court of law.
Yeah.
But people don't want to talk about that. They don't want to spend the time because again, these cases go on for sometimes years, right? Nobody's going to keep track of who gets charged and who doesn't. So it's just an ongoing circle, but it's also about education and really understanding how things work. You know, because a lot of people, again, they'll see one incident and just assume the cop was bad, you know, because it looked bad. You know, I had a conversation actually. Do you remember the incident in Atlanta where the cop was he stopped a guy in Wendy's for being intoxicated? They got into a fight. He took his taser, tried to shoot the cop with a taser, and he ended up shooting him. It was a big thing. Anyways, the city of Atlanta kind of burned for it. So Rogan, Joe, he was having a discussion about somebody with that. And his thing was, well, why didn't the cop just give him a ride home? Why did he do all this? Well, so Joe and I chat sometimes, and I was like, hey, let me give you my perspective. Let me just tell you from a cop's perspective. I said, well, Joe, if he were to take him home, leave his house, get back into another car, and kill a family of 4, right? The cop didn't do his job. The cop's liable for not doing his job correctly. So he tried to take him into custody. He tried to take him to jail for DUI. The guy fought, got the cop's taser. He made poor decisions, right? The individual made poor decisions that which ultimately led to him getting shot and then being killed, right? So justified shoot, right? You can't tase a cop and expect not something to happen, right?
Yeah.
So, like, you know, again, that's people. And another thing is cops don't fight fair. This isn't a fair fight. Like we're not boxing. Cops are allowed to go basically one level above force being received.
Interesting.
So a baton, which is absolute garbage, OC, pepper spray, or the taser are all less lethal options. So they're not lethal, they're less lethal.
Do cops tend to carry all 3 of those options?
So it depends on your training. It depends on your policy, things like that. For me, we had to carry 2 of them, right? So I would say that the taser and the baton are probably the 2 most popular, I would say, for the patrol aspect. I would say the taser is probably the better of the 2, but the taser does have about a 50-50 failure rate, right? So about 50% it fails. And that's when you'll see the, oh shit, what do I do now look? Because they become so reliant on the taser. When it doesn't work, they're like, uh-oh, I had to go hands off.
Why does it fail? It just doesn't like get...
Yeah, sometimes you don't have a good enough spread. Jackets, thick clothing, things like that. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't, or some people they just eat it.
Wow.
Right?
Damn.
Drugs and things like that. You
right.
know. So if someone were to grab a less lethal option, right? Depending on the scenario, the officer is then allowed to go one step above, which would then be deadly physical force, which is then they can either shoot that person or, you know, stab, whatever they have to do. Because really, once you reach that level, there's no option. It's just deadly physical force. Now, if the person has a baton and they're 20 feet away, I can't shoot them, right? If they start charging me, that's a different story.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's also another thing. Oh, it was just a shovel. It's like, yeah, you want to get hit in the head with a shovel? No. Right. So, of course, that's where we try to really explain to the general public what we do as cops, and again, it's something that I also kind of enjoy doing. I think it's this kind of thing is necessary.
Yeah. What's like an essential survival pack? You know, like a survival kit that people should have in their homes.
Yeah.
Just in case somebody were to, you know, one day, God forbid, break in.
Sure. I would say first thing to do is keep your doors locked, right? Security systems are good, like the Ring or like some type of surveillance system is good, and it'll, you know, kind of alert you if someone's at your front door or walking around your house. I think those are good, but most of the time you have to be alerted, whether it's on I don't really have an eye iWatch or whatever it's called, on their phone. Not everybody has their phone on them, but I would say locking doors is huge. Getting a dog is a great deterrent.
What about cat?
Or no, you know what?
Not as much.
From an attitude perspective, yes. Yeah, cats definitely will not like them coming in, but they're probably gonna run away. Yeah,
Maybe
dogs
they'll
I would
hiss.
say are great. Yeah, I
I don't know how big of a deterrent that is.
Yeah, throw kitty litter at him or something.
Yeah.
So I would say that dogs are great. Most dogs, unless they're trained, are not going to bite. So I used to apprentice some guy that trains police dogs, and so most dogs will not bite. Oh, he'll protect me. No, he won't.
Wow.
Most dogs, unless they're trained to fight, they will never bite. If they do bite, it's usually out of fear or out of survival. It's that fear or survival instinct that they have, right? So, but sometimes you just need them to bark. You don't need them to bite. You just need them to bark, right? So that's huge from a home perspective. Have a plan with your family, right? Have a plan. Tell your kids what to do if they're at the age. Tell your wife what to do, where to call. Have your kids memorize your address, right? Have a firearm. Obviously, keep it safe in your home if you have kids present. But also make it accessible, right? They make lock boxes that are super fast where you just put a combination and it's open and it's right there. I would say train with your firearm. Make sure that you understand that your lack of training is going to determine how effective you are when someone is breaking into your home. That's it. That there's no implication. Just because you bought a gun and you put some bullets in it does not mean that you were safe by any means, right? So that's huge. Stay in shape, stay in good physical condition. I would say overall, train medical, right? Tourniquets, chest seals. So again, stopthebleed.org, not affiliated with them in any way, shape, or form. They have a lot of free training. You can usually take one in your area. They'll you can do tourniquet applications, chest seal, wound packing, and stuff like that. Super simple pre-hospital intervention that could save your life or your child's life, which is super huge. Carry it on your persons, carry them in your vehicle. When you travel, I always carry at least 2 tourniquets when I travel, because most people, I don't have super thick quads. I'm working on it, but most people might require 2 tourniquets on their legs, so that's why I usually carry 2. But yeah, I think that's super important. And then again, just being vigilant. That's it. Being aware when you go to bed, make sure your doors are locked. When you're in your car, make sure your doors are locked. When you're at a freaking stoplight, don't just immediately go to your phone and start texting. Be looking around. If you're in a supermarket, before you get out of your car, just do a quick, is anybody coming up behind me, right?
Yeah.
So
at the gas station.
At a gas station. Oh, dude, gas stations are the worst, right? People immediately they go back on their phone. They go sit in their car or whatever. I try to go to, again, the location's important. Unless you really need gas, go to a better area with well lit, which is super important. I think those, it sounds like a lot, but it's really not. Common sense is huge.
What about verbally? Is there any way to communicate with
be loud.
Be loud.
Be loud.
If you hear somebody trying to get into your house,
I have a gun. Get back. I'll shoot you. Get back. I have a gun. The cops are coming. Right? Sometimes that's shit, I don't get shot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't get shot.
Let them know.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You let them know.
I've heard mixed things, if you advertise in any way that you have a gun, sometimes you'll see.
You better have one.
Yeah. But if you go, sometimes, I've heard, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
But that if you, for example, if you have a sign on your house, this home is protected by a gun owner or something, that might actually compel people to want to steal your gun.
Yeah. If you're not home. Yeah. So that's actually a great thing is don't put stupid stickers on your car. This car is protected by Glock. It's okay, if you're not in your car, there might be a gun inside. I'm gonna bust open your window and look.
Got it. So don't actually advertise that you have a gun in your car.
No, zero. Don't know.
It's not the deterrent that you would hope.
Just be normal.
Okay.
Don't open carry. So even if you're in an open carry state, open carry is for losers. Don't be concealed. Be normal. And 2, because if there is someone assessing the property to do harm, they see a gun, they're going to target you first. That guy's resistance.
Yeah.
I'm going to hit him. Or I might go somewhere else. But you don't want to, again, I always tell cops, don't dress like a cop off duty.
Yeah.
Just be normal. Like, just
don't attract attention.
Just be normal. Like, wear a normal ball cap. Don't wear some thin blue lines. I've no Punisher skulls. You don't leave that at home.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just be a normal dude, right? Or girl, right? Because like that's it. And so being normal but being capable is huge. And again, staying vigilant I can't tell you how important that is. That is everything. If you can see it before it happens or before it potentially happens, you can avoid a lot, right? Oh, you're walking down the street, all of a sudden, a guy's at the corner that maybe he wants something from you. And you're like, oh, you know what? If I wasn't doing this and I saw this, I would have turned around or said, went across the street, right? Because sometimes I don't know how it is here in LA, but like, most of the homeless guys, they aren't going to do anything to you, right? But sometimes they might, right? You're just an opportunity. Just don't give them that opportunity.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow. Such good advice. Because, I mean, we live in such crazy times, and...
yeah, it's going to probably get crazier.
It's going to get crazier.
I think so. I mean, no, it's an election year and all that stuff's going on. I'm not a very political guy by any means, but we need to be better as Americans. I think we need better Americans to be more competent, to be proud to be an American. I'm not saying it's not a party affiliation thing. It's just be a good person, right? Like, contribute to society. We need strong men. We need caring and nurturing women, right? We need strong women, right? Like, super important. Be that person. That's what I always tell people is just be good, be capable. That's it. I hate seeing fat people. Like, it just makes me mad. It's like unless there's a reason.
Yeah.
You don't have, like, okay, that's your reason. But if you don't have a reason, then it's a choice. You decided to be that way.
Yeah, I mean, there are systemic reasons. Like, some people just don't have the education.
Sure.
Food
like
some people literally don't realize that sugar sweetened beverages are not good for you. Many people today still live in food deserts. I mean, it is a big problem, but the primary cause of obesity is not genetics.
Correct.
It's that you're eating too damn much.
You're eating too damn much.
Yeah.
And again, like, people, even if it's a lack of education thing, like, you just don't feel good.
Yeah.
So if you don't feel good, usually you try to fix the problem. Most people do, right? So, like, and maybe they've always felt that way. I don't know. But, like, from a law enforcement perspective, fat cops should not exist. Zero. You're a professional.
How do you counter? Because, I mean, I would imagine there's a lot of downtime as a cop, or like sedentary time, rather.
Yeah.
And it's probably hard when you're on the job to get high quality protein and the like, right? There's like the stereotype of the cop going to the donut shop,
correct.
Right?
Yeah, it's a thing, and what's funny is I used to go to the grocery store and get the whole chickens, and that's literally what I eat for lunch. I would eat a whole chicken. People would. Not everybody, but some of the guys would make fun of me. They'd be going to, the burger joint because they get a discount or whatever, I'm like, no, I'm just getting my whole chicken and my bag of spinach. Like, I'm good. They're like, nerd, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, that's why I look like this and you look like that.
You're
like,
jacked,
it is what it is, right? And so it's just like, but yes, the protein side of things, it's very hard, especially working night shift. And the only thing open is a freaking 7-Eleven. So you're going to grab a Monster energy drink, and then you're going to grab maybe like some type of like candy bar or some chips or something, because that's all that's there. Right?
7-Eleven though now has. I mean, I've been to a few 7-Elevens recently because I've been one of my brothers just moved to Vegas, and
nice.
I'm taking like road trips regularly to go and visit him, and like, you can find like hard boiled eggs at 7-Elevens now. You can find grilled chicken, protein bars.
I don't know why.
Monster milk. I'm not endorsing that particular product because it's got a lot of junk in it, but I mean, when
it's
push comes to shove,
it's better than
nothing.
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, Coca-Cola for sure.
Yeah. That's the thing is, like, you think about it, too, also the amount of caffeine that some cops drink is insane. Right? I mean, I'm talking like 700 milligrams a day.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot. Double, right? Double what you should be taking, right?
Yeah.
If not more, right? So, yeah, I the diet's really a problem. But again, we try to offer these resources. Here are some quick meals you can do. Crock pots, right, are great. They're super fast, super easy, pretty cost effective. You can throw 4 chicken breasts in there with the, cup of rice with some, bone broth. Boom. You have meals for 4 days, right? Just eat that instead of whatever. And that's the thing too, is high quality protein. Because again, we push protein. That's our thing. Protein and good fats, and fruit, right? So, I mean, I eat carbs. Like I like pasta. I love bread. Like all that stuff too. But obviously within moderation, But no, man, it's frustrating to see cops that are overweight, out of shape, and then they still eat that way. So, but I mean, I'll tell you right now. But the culture's kind of changing, and cops have no problem calling out other cops. It's especially on social media. There's a thing called a TikTok cop now.
Interesting.
So it's like where cops will do like a TikTok dance or whatever in uniform. It's the most infuriating thing ever. It's like, this is not community policing. You're first off, you shouldn't be in uniform dancing to Britney Spears or whatever it is. I don't know what people do these days. But that's, get out of your patrol car, go play with kids playing basketball. Get out there, go shake hands, go meet the community, go be a part of the community. Let them trust and respect you. And then through that, you'll see change. Like you'll see people like, no, man, he's cool, right? Like you'll see that. You'll see guys that are like, hey, my son wants to take a picture with you, right? Like you'll see that. Like my wife said the other day to me, she was like, if you don't eat this, Mr. Jeff, who's like basically my brother, he's a cop. He's like, Mr. Jeff's going to arrest you. And I looked at her, I said, no, he's not. He said, no, I'm going to have him arrest you. I said, but when you tell kids that, they get scared of cops, right? Like, even if it's just a joke, right? So I train dogs, right? So everything you do with the dog is training. Everything. If it's like, it's just one treat, you're still training the dog, right? It's a conditioned response to a freaking stimulus, right? So like the same thing with kids. So I tell like parents, don't tell your kids, the cop's going to arrest you if you don't eat your vegetables. Don't tell them that. Yeah. Because they're going to be like, well, I don't want the cop to arrest me. Right. Well, cops are just going on arresting kids that don't eat vegetables. They've never done that.
They've never done that.
Ever. Right? And if you did, you'd hear about it, right? So it's like, no, it's like, let's make them into a positive image. And because, again, 70 million interactions a year, and you hear about how many. Yeah. So I always put things into perspective, right? Because you'll see some of these activists, and they'll just be like, oh, these cops, look what they did here and there. And I'm like, cool, you're highlighting one incident. Yes, it might be bad, but it'll probably be handled the way it should be handled per what we've seen in the past, right? Okay, but what about the other 69 million incidences? You're not going to talk about all the good they do in the world? Yeah, dude, there's so much heroism in this profession that gets unnoticed. It's insane. It's like you can't. I get really passionate about guys that are actually putting bad guys in jail. Like criminals, like people that want to hurt other people in jail. And those guys, they don't want the fame. They don't want nothing. They do it because they love the job. They love it. And it truly is a calling. I really think it is a calling. Yes, it's a job, but like you got to be a special person to want to do this job.
Yeah. Well, again, they're like real life superheroes, and your Instagram does a wonderful job of, I think, portraying, the reality of that, of how tough that job can be.
It's I don't think there's another job like it. Like people ask me all the time, I'm like, obviously there are a lot of difficult jobs in the world. I would say this one's very unique, right? Because it's the blanket of protection of society. Think about that though. You think about other countries and how people can do whatever they want in some countries, right? And you look at pre 2020 with all the defunding of the police and all this stuff that was going on. And you saw what happened, particularly to like more of like the liberal cities where the blanket of protection was slightly pulled back and you saw crime just.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Of course.
And that was just a little bit. That wasn't like that. Like that was just a little corner of but now some people don't want police at all, right? They want to abolish the police. They don't want cops around. And it's like, do you not see what Chicago, I mean, I saw a statistic the other day about Chicago. It's like, it was a couple weeks back, I think. Like, it was like in 5 years, this was the first day they didn't have a homicide. So they had a homicide every day for like 5 years. Wow. And they were like, it was like one of those signs on the wall. It's like, nobody was injured here type deal. But it was like, but if you think about that, Like that's crazy. Chicago's worse than like parts of Afghanistan.
Wow.
Yeah, it's true. Like that's like what the data shows.
Wow.
You know, and so people don't realize. Some people are just in their own little bubble.
Well, they're luxury beliefs that like we don't need police, or that we should be defunding the police. You know, I mean, there's to a certain degree, like I kind of, you know, I can understand where it comes from. It's like we like to talk shit about like the healthcare industry, you know, because it has it you know.
Let's talk about
because
that.
well, because all we hear about are the instances where it's let people down, and it continues to let people down. But at the end of the day, like if I break an arm or I have some kind of mysterious medical thing happen where I need professional help, I'm going straight to a Western doctor. You know, to get 100%. Answers, right?
Yeah.
If I feel threatened or vulnerable and somebody's trying to break into my house, I'm calling 911, you know? And I mean, yeah, I just can't even imagine society without that level of protection. It's like, what am I paying taxes for?
Right, exactly.
You know? So
let me give you kind of another example about the healthcare side of things. You know, I have my opinions about a lot of things, right? So, me and my wife, we just had twins, right? And
Congrats.
So, thank you. One was breached. Right. And so usually when a twin is breached, you have to do a hip ultrasound, okay, to make sure they don't have hip dysplasia. So my wife, she's a nurse, and they're like, okay, well, so she wasn't breached, he was breached. And so they're like, okay, went to the pediatrician, and they did the little test, like, okay, they both look fine, whatever the case may be. And what ended up happening was they're like, okay, let's schedule him an ultrasound. And my wife goes, well, can we do it for her just in case? And they were like, sure. So they did, and he was fine, and she ended up having one hip that was slightly, you know, off at an angle or whatever the case may be. But they weren't even going to test her at all. But my wife took the initiative and said, no, why don't we just do both, right? And it's like, we don't know what that would have done in the future with her development, like with her anatomy as she would have grown. Would she have had hip issues, whatever the case may be, you know, dislocations, whatever. But it just kind of goes, it's like, and then if you, I talked to one other doctor. He goes, yeah, in Sweden, I believe, they hip ultrasound every baby, every single baby. It's a part of their thing. We don't do it in America. Why? Because it costs too much money. It's like, yeah, but how much would you have saved if again, I don't know the data on like hip dysplasia as adults, right? But like could have been tracked as kids.
Yeah,
but
the healthcare costs down the line.
Right, exactly right. So it's like you think about it, it's like, well, you got to take care of yourself. Like if you want something done, like I've heard stories of doctors not doing full blood panels and things like that. And it's like, that's super frustrating. It's like, hey, I want to know what my levels are across the board.
Yeah.
And now people are paying big money for private labs to then run their blood, right? And so it's the same thing. It's like, well, why can't we just do it here? I pay insurance. Why can't we just do it here? You can do it in this and this and that. And so as it pertains to healthcare, it's kind of the same thing. I'm paying my tax dollars. I want them to work the best way that they can. Most people want trained cops. Nobody that I've asked goes, yeah, I want a subpar cop to respond to me.
Yeah.
Like, I want the guy that doesn't train. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, no, that's not how that works. Like, I want the guy that trains at a high level. I want the guy that has the best gear. I want the guy that takes his job seriously, that's physically fit.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, and one kind of phrase that I say is, would you want you to rescue you? Right? So like, Max, would you want you to rescue you? If you were in a situation where someone's trying to break into your house, would you want someone like Max to come and save you? If the answer is no, which is fine, that's the self-assess. Well, why is it no?
Yeah. The answer would be yes, with a little bit more training, like fight training skills, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, again, it's like, hey, when someone breaks into my house, I know that I'm going to lock the door. I'm going to barricade myself in my room. I'm going to get my gun. I'm going to point at the door, and I'm going to start yelling, hey, I have a gun, and I'm not afraid to use it while I'm calling 911.
That's the move.
That's the move.
Yeah.
Locking the door, you're creating a barrier, right? Because the last thing you want to do is try to clear your own house, right? Because you don't know where that guy is. He could be hiding right on the other side of the door. You come out with that gun, he grabs it, and now you're fighting over a gun, right? And if you don't train weapon retention like we talked about, it's a whole different thing. So that's honestly a huge thing, right? If you don't have kids, for me, if someone breaks into my house, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my kids. I'm going to try to get them all together, you know, and that's the thing. And then I'm going to go to work, right? So that's the difference between trained and untrained. Is a good positive outcome or we don't know.
Yeah.
Like it could happen. Like I'd rather be on the side of success and, you know, increased level of success as opposed to like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm not prepared. I don't have the right tools. And it's like, well, that's your fault. And that's the hard pill to swallow when you see people doing these news interviews. They're like, oh, this, like that. Well, no. You could have done something, but you didn't because you don't know. And that's okay. But don't point the finger.
Yeah.
When it was really your fault.
There was another video that went viral recently where it was like some like thieves were posing as like either like building like maintenance workers or package delivery people, and they were like trying to break into this person's house. They didn't think anybody was home.
Oh wow. And
the guy inside like opened fire on the door. And
he won.
And he won. Yeah. They ran away.
Weird how that works.
I thought it was cool as hell.
Yeah.
Crazy. I also think that like, obviously just circling back to mental health, like it's so important to provide services to, law enforcement officers and also healthcare professionals, because like part of the reason, I think another potential reason why there's this dissonance sometimes you see, for example, like doctors who are really out of shape.
Sure.
It's like, yeah, sometimes like there's choice involved, but also it's like the stress of that job. I mean, there's a lot of depression within that industry,
Yeah, absolutely.
Somewhere.
Again, they cut people open. I mean, you look at surgeons, like that's not normal.
Yeah.
It's not normal, right? So it's like, granted, they get paid very well for what they do, right? So it's, yeah, I totally agree. Like the mental health side of things is huge. Being mentally prepared to do the job is so important. Like, yeah, you can have all the best training in the world, but if you're not mentally ready to I mean, this job goes from 0 to 100 in seconds. So you have to be super calm and collective to being very capable of violence. Now it's controlled violence with rules, but that's what people have a hard time saying that with cops. Like, oh, cops shouldn't be violent. Well, a bullet here is the same as it is anywhere else in the world, right? So it's like it's still violence, but it's controlled violence, right? It's combatives, right? And so the word violence is not really used in law enforcement because it's not politically correct. So we usually just say combatives, right? So it's like, but some people will say defensive tactics or subject control, but that's not what those things are. Like that's just one aspect of the whole entire picture. So, I mean, it is a violent encounter. It's a violent encounter. And that's why people have a hard time processing that from a law enforcement perspective. It's like, oh, it's serve and protect. How do you think that happens? Like, how do you think active shooters get stopped? They get stopped with a good guy with a gun.
Yeah. Good guy with a gun.
A good guy with a gun.
What's one piece of fitness advice that you think every police officer and civilian should hear?
Fitness advice? Man, I would say eat protein. Just because I think by simply doing that, you would solve a lot of issues in your life.
Up your protein intake.
Yeah, I mean...
Favorite proteins?
Prioritize beef.
Yeah.
Beef, bison, elk, all the red meats. Chicken, it's fine too. Fish as well. I think that's huge. I always tell people, I'm like, hey, if you just prioritize protein every meal, you're going to lose weight. You're going to feel better. You're going to get stronger. Just simply doing that. Like, even if you don't do anything else, obviously try to limit sugar as well on top of that. But that's huge. I think that if you feel better, you're more likely to go outside and go for a walk and maybe start to lift weights and things like that. So I would say fitness advice, you got to put the right fuel in the body for sure.
Yeah. The right fuel in the tank.
That's right.
I love it. Adam, how can people support your work? How can they connect with you, work with you?
Sure. You can follow my personal page, which is going to be Adam, Haidary, Haidary. And obviously I have PolicePosts, which is one word. And then I have EF Combatives, which is one word on Instagram. And then Effective Training is the fitness side. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to DM any of those pages. I have the teams on it. And again, please give us some time if you want some training as well. We do also offer trainings to civilians, for the general public on the combative side as well. You don't just have to be a cop to attend our training. We do vet you before you come to our training. Obviously, it's usually hosted at a law enforcement.
Dude, I want to attend. That sounds
location.
Awesome.
Hell yeah, dude. Anytime.
Is it always where does it happen?
So it usually happens at an agency or at like a jiu-jitsu school.
Wow.
So like,
you should take this on the road. Like, do it in like.
I'm down, dude. Whatever. Yeah. I would absolutely love to have you. California's weird. So we are trying to get post certified through the state, which kind of allows us to, get credit for training. So it's a whole vetting process there. But again, like we'll be in Ontario. We were just in Napa not that long ago. So we're all over. Then we have, I'll be at LASD tomorrow doing a little course there. It's like a little 2-hour course with their training guys. We're all over the country, man.
That's awesome.
I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Last question. That
yes, sir. Oh, please, let's do it.
Yeah. What does living a genius life mean to you?
Ooh, the genius life.
Yeah.
Man, I would say having common sense. I know that's something that's hard to do, but I would say, I have 2 rules for my kids, and this is what I think is a genius life is be a good man and take care of your family. And also taking care of your family is taking care of yourself. And a lot of people don't do that.
Amen.
They don't prioritize. I have 4 kids and a wife, and I still make time to work out. I still make time to eat good foods, go shopping for good proteins, eat eggs, like all that stuff, right? Like it's just got to be a priority. That's what the genius life is to me is you just be smart about it. Just be smart and take care of yourself.
Damn, man. You are a hero. Thanks for coming in.
I'm just a guy on a mission.
Just a guy on a mission.
That's it.
I love it, dude. Well, thank you again for your time and your wisdom. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.